So I've been watching a little bit of too much OTT content. So since this presentation is something of a sequel, I said let me call it season 2 of Blitzscaling. Good evening. Request you to please settle down. We'll start in a few seconds. Meanwhile, you can take note of the 3 forthcoming FOFs: 16th of Jan, 20th of Feb, and 13th March. All are Thursdays, forthcoming 3 FOF sessions, same venue. So I've been watching a little bit of too much OTT content. So since this presentation is something of a sequel, I said let me call it season 2 of Blitzscaling. We will be discussing mainly unlisted companies, and we will be discussing some US companies. Again, in passing, this is not a deep dive on any particular company. And if at all I happen to mention any Indian listed companies in passing, there's no buy, sell, hold recommendation. I guess everyone knows this. Uh, this is more of a discussion on an interesting person I came across and an interesting organization. So it's in that context, and it's not meant to be any company specific discussion. So this talk was the season 1. This was a talk that we had valuing newly listed loss making companies and how to figure out valuation of them, or how to figure out the business models of those companies. This was a time when uh, you had the first listings in India of all the erstwhile startups. These were companies like Paytm and Zomato and those kind of companies, Policy Bazaar, and all these companies started getting listed in India. And this was actually the last virtual FOF that we had in the post COVID period. This was at the fag end of the second wave of COVID. So this happened from our office and people watched it remotely. So, like what happens in sequels or in season 2, first you have to start with the recap of what happened in season 1. At that time, we had also mentioned this book, Blitzscaling, in passing. So, what is blitzscaling really? It's combination of two words, blitz and scaling. And we had discussed all of these concepts at that point in time. We had discussed cost of acquiring a customer. Uh, this is as simple as it sounds. Let us say you spend 1000 rupees or 10,000 rupees on advertising. You spend 10,000 rupees on advertising and 1000 people see your ad. So, cost of showing the ad to each person is 10 rupees. Now, out of 1000 people that saw your ad, maybe only 100 visit your website or download your app. Out of those 100, maybe just one customer actually starts transacting with you on a commercial basis. So in which case, cost of acquiring a customer is 10,000 rupees. So it's a simple funnel which even traditional advertising uses. How many impressions, how many people saw your ad, how many people landed on the website, how many people gave you a lead, how many people converted, and people who are transacting, that kind of a thing. So that is one thing that we discussed in the first presentation. The second concept that we discussed was lifetime value of a customer. Let us say a customer is giving you 5,000 rupees as profits per year, and that customer is expected to be with you for 10 years, then your lifetime value of that customer will be 50,000 rupees. Then we discussed the concept of a lot of these startup companies having very high operating leverage. In don't get worried by the technical nature of the term. It's very, very simple. Businesses with a lot of fixed costs. So, fixed costs of the technology platform, fixed costs of the call centers, fixed costs of the logistics network. Now, if you have 10,000 rupees as your fixed cost and you have one customer, then your cost per customer is 10,000 rupees. But instead, if you have 10,000 customers, then cost per customer is only 1 rupees. So, essentially, it's about scaling your business while keeping costs constant. So, because of the a combination of these three things, cost of acquiring a customer, lifetime value, and spreading fixed costs over a large number of customers, we explained this concept that all losses are not bad. Losses which ultimately result in huge profits down the road can effectively be good. And we also discussed that this is not a new concept. We spoke about uh, Berkshire Hathaway, its investment in Geico, how Geico would make a loss in the first year because of cost of acquiring a customer, but that was encouraged by Berkshire Hathaway and Geico. People were encouraged to make such losses because future cash flows were much more stronger. We discussed things like total addressable market. This could be because you start in one city, then go nationwide, you get into adjacencies. So, Amazon earlier was just a bookseller, it got into uh, toys and CDs and things like that, and eventually became the everything store. So, we spoke about all of these. Again, businesses entering new areas. So, erstwhile e-commerce player like Amazon setting up the cloud computing business. And we spoke about the network effects. Again, network effects are not something which is new to the world. We spoke about the concept of survival of the fattest, which Warren Buffett spoke about many, many years ago in the context of newspapers. Buffett said that in any city, the fattest newspaper, meaning the newspaper with the most number of pages, most amount of content, is the newspaper with the most readership. And because most readers read that newspaper, most advertisers will gravitate towards that newspaper. Because most advertisers are there, because that newspaper has the maximum revenue, that newspaper is able to generate more content. And that becomes a virtuous cycle. It becomes a flywheel and it gains advantage over a period of time. And all the other newspapers fall by the wayside. There remains only one dominant newspaper in the city. Uh, this concept is called network effect. Think about a ride hailing app, for example. Uh, let's say if Uber has the most number of riders, passengers wanting to take a trip, most cab drivers will sign on to Uber. And because most cab drivers are there on Uber, more riders will come to Uber again. Now, if I were to start a fancy new app, brilliant user interface, brilliant user experience, promote it very heavily, but who will sign up to the app and wait for a cab to come? Because most riders and drivers are on the other app. So, that becomes a double-sided network effect, and that is what most of these startups chase, especially when it's a winner take all kind of business. In a winner take all kind of business, speed matters more than efficiency. How quickly you are able to do a nationwide rollout, how quickly you are able to go into all adjacencies, how quickly you are able to ramp up volume, that is what matters the most, rather than are you efficiently managing your costs, or is your hiring process very sound and things like that. All those efficiency metrics fall by the wayside. What matters most is speed and scale, because ultimately there is only going to be only one winner. recap ends here. Uh, Now, a plot twist. Most of the things that I spoke about in the first P metrics, cost of acquiring a customer, lifetime value, all of those things are largely irrelevant, as we will see in the presentation going forward. This is something that I learnt recently and which I'll explain. So, I came across this book on social media. The book cover is portrayed on the left hand side. Uh, it's about a person, it's written by a person, Alok Sama, who used to work with Softbank, and he was probably the number 3 person in the organization, or very, very senior person in the organization. Uh, Very difficult to describe the book. It's partly Alok Sama's personal biography, his life history, his experiences, a lot of anecdotes of what all things happened. Partly it's about the startup world. It's a mix of various things. Partly it's clarifying his stance. Uh, he was under a cloud when he was working with Softbank. He came out clean at the end of it. So partly it's to uh, vindicate himself and to explain his stance to the world. So the book is various things. You learn things like what is the favorite wine of Masayoshi Son, which is displayed on the right hand side. This is written maybe 100 times in the book, which is very useful if you are inviting Masa over to dinner at your place, but otherwise not so much of use. As I mentioned, there was a smear campaign apparently being run by this person, Rajeev Mishra. It's embarrassing that someone with my name would do such a thing. So apparently, Rajeev Mishra paid $500,000, as per this Wall Street Journal story, to an Italian businessman to run a smear campaign against Nikesh Arora and Alok Sama, uh, to complain to enforcement directorate and tax authorities, to send threatening anonymous letters, uh, threatening physical harm to their family members, trying to honey trap Nikesh Arora with hidden cameras in his hotel room, and all sorts of things. So all of this is entertaining, but how does it help uh, in terms of business understanding? The good part is there was enough material in the book about this person, uh, diminutive person over there on the left hand side, which is Masayoshi Son, and which led me down a rabbit hole. Picked up one of his biographies, read a lot of articles about Softbank, the organization he was working with, their investments over the decades, and things like that. So it was a good gateway drug in that sense, to get you excited about Masayoshi Son and Softbank. And this person is a very interesting person. Unfortunately, uh, in popular opinion, he is tarnished because of association with WeWork. So, popular press has written at length about all that went wrong at WeWork, Adam Newman, and because Masayoshi Son was the biggest funder of WeWork, he is being portrayed in media as this cartoon character who suddenly has come into a lot of money and who throws around money without any due diligence, without any business understanding, someone who's very naive and gullible, and who lost billions of dollars behind this Jesus Christ of uh, the co-working space, or someone who wanted to elevate the consciousness of everyone working there, who'd serve alcohol in the co-working spaces, where there were a lot of allegations of uh, sexual harassment against the top managers of WeWork, where this guy the WeWork brand, he registered in his personal name, and then he would charge a branding fee to the entity. Company was bleeding cash. He bought a $60 million jet and was flying around everywhere, uh, smoking weed and doing drugs and all sorts of things. It's so in there's this documentary which I think is on Hulu or some other platforms. Again, people who have subscribed to Apple TV would have seen this uh, series which was made on based on WeWork. It's called We Crashed. So plenty of books have been written about this and how things went wrong in this company. So $16 billion was put in by Softbank into this company. Almost all of it completely gone. So I don't know how much they recovered at the end of it, but I would assume a complete loss kind of thing. And at peak, it was valued at $47 billion. So it's not a small sum, meaning a ton of money was lost behind this, and because of this, Masayoshi Son got a lot of flack. But when I read Alok Sama's book and his biography and some articles about him, the story was very, very interesting, leaving aside the shenanigans that happened at WeWork. So, Masa's grandparents were illegal immigrants to Japan. He's not a, unlike what is normally imagined, he's not of Japanese origin. Masa is not of Japanese origin. In Korea, after being illegal immigrants, they were effectively slum dwellers in Japan. Uh, on unoccupied land, they would just squat there and put tin roofs and have a family over there. And they would fish in the river near to their dwelling and cook that fish and eat, and came from a very, very humble background. And culturally also, Japanese people are somewhat closed, and it's a closed society. So uh, although he would go to Japanese schools, speak Japanese and study the same curriculum, uh, he had an opportunity to visit the US as an exchange student. Uh, he got a chance to go to California as an exchange student. Now, as a group, when they went to the airport, to the Japanese airport, he was not given a passport to travel. He was given a exit permit because family was of illegal immigrants. He was not even a Japanese citizen at that point in time. And from such a humble beginning, how this person came up in life, what all things he did, the kind of ambition that he has, the kind of aggression that he has, the kind of successful deals that he has done over the years, that was very, very interesting to read about. Even while he was a student, he made almost $3 million. He would be very, very persuasive. He would uh, typically not take no for an answer, uh, go behind convincing. So, one of the things that one of the ideas that he had required research work from his professor. Now, that was a very, very valuable thing. And without that, his product idea would not have succeeded. And he did not have any money to pay to the professor. But he somehow convinced the professor to accept contingent and deferred payment and part with that research work and thing. And that's how he made quite a bit of money. Met his future wife while studying at school and college. Again, so when he went from Japan to the US, first was as an exchange student, then he came back and went again to the US for further studies. In high school, he just gave some exams, and within weeks he was out of the high school and into college, which was at a very, very young age, which was unheard of. And for a student to come from some other country to understand the curriculum of US which included subjects like English, which he was not that good at, included subjects like history, which was American history in parts. So it was amazing as to how he integrated himself and came up the curve very, very quickly. At the time of dot com, he was briefly the richest person in the world. Not many people remember that now. And after the dot com crash, his name was in the Guinness Book of World Records for the person who lost the maximum amount of wealth. From peak to bottom, the difference was $60 billion. And this record was unbeaten for a long time. Later on, Elon Musk took that title because of the crash in price of Tesla a few years back. Tesla, of course, has recovered quite a bit. So, but uh, this is the background of the person. It's not that suddenly he got lucky and he mindlessly throws around money in things like WeWork. Before ChatGPT or before this whole hype about large language models and all these models that are coming out, Gemini or the OpenAI's models, he was someone who saw that AI will be a very, very big thing in the future. And for he's been saying this for more than 10 years now or even longer. And he saw the potential of things like AI. And not only this, he has been right in a lot of other things. He very nearly acquired a big chunk of Facebook at the initial years. He was in talks with Jeff Bezos to acquire almost 20% of Amazon in the early days. Big investor in various other things, we'll talk about it. Uh, took the chip maker ARM private in a by paying a premium and taking over the whole company. At one point in time, before this huge run up in Nvidia, he wanted to take over Nvidia completely. If ARM had not happened, he was thinking of taking over Nvidia. Again, there was a point in time where Nvidia and ARM were exploring a merger between the two companies and all. Again, early investor in things like ByteDance and TikTok. So uh, it's not just about WeWork. A lot of other interesting things have been done by this person. He wears many hats. It's not just one role that he plays. And with those many, many hats that he wears, he has multiple personalities. So uh, one Masayoshi Son will not be the same as the other Masayoshi Son. Uh, we'll see what all things he does. So he's a business operator. Softbank, as some of you may know, is a telecom company in Japan. Uh, offers like we have Airtel and Jio here. Softbank is a telecom company in Japan. He plays a role of figuring out what is coming next in terms of technological developments 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out, 20 years out, and tries to be early in the predictions that he has so that he benefits from that. That's the second hat that he wears. The third hat is that of a venture capitalist, where he identifies young entrepreneurs, figures out who are the people who are likely to succeed, and bets on them early. That is the third one. We look at why he wants to be a monopolist. Probably you already know that in the network effect businesses, there is a big advantage to be the winner because winner takes all. Again, to rehash, Viru Sahasrabudhe of the movie Three Idiots had this question for his students: who was the first person to step on the moon? And then he says, who was the second person? No one cares. So again, if you are in Mumbai, then Times of India is the leading newspaper, which is number two, not that relevant. So Again, if you are a stock exchange, then it's better to be a NSE rather than a regional stock exchange. So same way, he wants to be a monopolist to win in the network effect businesses and even otherwise. We'll talk about that a bit. Some people call him a price manipulator. We look at two examples. Uh, I leave the judgment to you. Was he justified, not justified? Uh, Answer is mixed. There are no clear cut answers here. We will talk about the time machine management. Now, this is a framework that he has. Essentially, he looks at the Western countries, especially United States, uh, as the sun, where the light is there, and that light spreads. So, things which are innovated in the US, he tries to take them global. We'll look at some of the examples of this uh, in later slides. And we'll look at him as the fundraiser. Before that, let's look at the organization that he runs or that he founded, Softbank. Very, very unlikely origins. So, initially, it was a distributor of software. It's like being a seller for Microsoft Windows and Office kind of thing. So, where uh, you have a product in a CD or on a box and you sell it to either individuals or corporates. I don't have much data about those very, very early days, but that was the beginning. Then he started publishing two or three tech magazines in Japan. Again, very, very ordinary publishing business where he found a niche that the mainstream publications were not focusing so much on tech. So he established these magazines, which were reasonably successful, but again, nothing earth shattering in that sense. A magazine focused on a narrow vertical. These were the beginnings. Then he became the JV partner for Yahoo in Japan. This is much before the dot com boom, and this is where one of the deals where bulk of his wealth was made. He was early in identifying the promise of something like a Yahoo. He figured out that Yahoo is not paying enough attention to the Japanese market, approached them, did a JV, and that was a big winner for him. And initially, he saw, as we discussed, at one point in time, he was thinking of taking 20% in Amazon. Now, that did not work out. But then he said, what's the next best thing? He says, let me go and fund a similar company. So he went and put in $200 million in Alibaba. So look at the kind of returns. Of course, some of these will be peak numbers, but or maybe realized, may not be realized. 30 billion may have come down later. But these were very, very successful investments, whichever yardstick you use. He bought Vodafone Japan and renamed it to Softbank Mobile. So that's how he became the telecom operator. Now, this is a very, very interesting story, the acquisition of Vodafone Japan. So, Masayoshi Son likes to say this again and again. He says, in a battle between the crazy guy and the smart guy, the crazy guy always wins. This has been his motto in life, and this is what he has been looking for in founders. If you just mentally run through the list of founders that he has funded and their public behavior, you will see some patterns, right? So, when Adam Newman behaves in the way he behaves, or uh, when you have someone like a Bhavish Agarwal who uh, rants on social media or has this very, very aggressive persona, that is in a way reflection of what Masayoshi Son wants. It's a as they say, it's a feature and not a bug in terms of the kind of founders that he selects. He wants crazy people. He wants very, very aggressive people who have very high ambition and who try to scale things very, very quickly, very, very fast, and get into too many areas. So this is the backstory of how SoftBank became a telecom company and why it succeeded. So the story goes like this. Steve Jobs founded Apple, was thrown out of Apple, came back to Apple, launched the iPod. iPod became successful, right? And iPod was a popular product. Masayoshi Son had this thing that why don't we have a iPod and a phone combination, which Apple would make. So on a piece of paper, he did a crude drawing and goes to Steve Jobs and says, I have this great idea for you. Why don't you make this kind of a phone? And which has iPod features. Now, probably Steve Jobs was already thinking about something like an iPhone or whatever. This guy was pestering. So Steve Jobs said, this is a very ugly drawing. What are you even saying? And I don't have a phone. Why are you pestering me? He says, no, no, you should create a phone. Steve Jobs says, but what is your interest in this? You are not even a telecom company. So Masayoshi Son says, if you create a phone and if I am a telecom company, you have to give me exclusive rights for this in Japan. Steve Jobs says, okay, take care. Handshake. If I make a phone and you are a telecom company, you get exclusive rights for this in Japan. Sometimes goes by, this fellow goes and acquires Vodafone because of this handshake deal. Vodafone is so tired of Japan. They are, I think, number 3, number 4 player, whatever. They are uh, losing customers every month. They are bleeding cash every month. They just want to hand over the company to someone and run away. So this guy goes and says, I'll acquire this for $15 billion, this telecom company. Vodafone says, excellent, take it. Probably they take deferred payment or whatever. 15 out of $15 billion, 10 billion plus is borrowing, leveraged buyout. Vodafone effectively ran away, gave it to him on a platter. By the time I think iPhone was launched or about to be launched, goes back saying, I have a telecom company, you have a phone, our handshake deal. Steve Jobs says, okay, you are exclusive. And this was before iPhone became successful. It was not guaranteed that iPhone will be this huge success. Even after it was launched, people had their doubts and it was not a success on day one as such. So this guy becomes the exclusive provider of iPhone in Japan. Now you can guess what happens. Now suddenly there's a U-turn. All the subscribers who are running away stop going away. More people start signing up. His ARPU goes up, and it's a wildly successful deal for him. This is what he means that between a smart guy and a crazy guy, the crazy guy wins. This is what he did, and this is what he tries to replicate in a lot of other things that he does. So there's this interesting blog site 7GC and Co. So some of the data that I'll be showing will be taken from this blog site. So this is just the source for some of the data points. We have looked at the crazy guy wins Masa. Now we look at Masa, the fundraiser. Because of his success with Yahoo and with Alibaba, he would go around and say, I am a tech investor who's created a 44% IRR. Now, anyone with a 44% IRR typically will not have any problems raising money from anyone. So, in terms of track record, that is a track record he went around propagating. He had this meeting with MBS, at that time the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He went and said, give me $100 billion and it will be Japan's gift to Saudi Arabia, that $100 billion we will convert into $1 trillion for you. He did not get $100 billion, but pretty close. He got $45 billion from Saudi Arabia over a 45-minute discussion. He likes to say 1 billion a minute was the fundraise that he did. And since Saudi Arabia was putting in $45 billion, their neighbors UAE put in another 15 billion. So uh, $60 billion fundraise. And again, the circles that he goes around, within a week, he had met these three people: Donald Trump, Mr. Modi, and MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So that was the kind of access and network that he had. And this fundraise, the Vision Fund, completely changed the rules of the game. At one point in time, VC funds, technology funds, would be $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. That was the scale at which these funds operated. And even after Softbank raised this 100 billion, the next biggest fund, Sequoia, was at 8 billion and Insight at 6.3. And a lot of other reputed firms would be at $1-2 billion kind of things. So just look at the scale difference between this guy and the rest of the funds. That was completely unheard of and crazy at that point in time. That was one. And second, this 100 billion was not just equity. So part of it was equity, but a large part of it was borrowing. People who have heard about leveraged buyouts or would have read the book or watched the documentary on RJR Nabisco and how the leveraged buyout worked. Leveraged buyout is okay, but that typically happens in a mature company. You raise some equity, you raise some borrowed money, and you buy a company. That company has existing cash flow, which you use to service debt and all of that. It's a established practice in private equity. But never before were venture capital funds being run on borrowed money. This was again completely unheard of, and at the scale at which this guy launched the SoftBank Vision Fund. Just to give a flavor of the kind of companies that SoftBank has invested in India, we'll not be discussing all of these, but we'll be discussing some of these things. Again, I spoke about Adam Newman and I spoke about Bhavish Agarwal. Rahul Yadav, again, a very, very Adam Newman-esque character right here in India. So there was this big fiasco with housing.com, and now I think FIR has been filed against him by this Naukri.com people. So the plot twist I spoke about earlier, that cost of acquiring a customer, lifetime value, total addressable market, none of that matters. There's an anecdote in Alok Sama's book where Alok Sama and Bhavish Agarwal are sitting and discussing the purchase that SoftBank is going to make in Ola. And they discuss none of these things. And the mandate to Alok Sama was go and get the investment done. Way back in history, Masayoshi Son was negotiating with Mark Zuckerberg for investment in Facebook. And he felt the valuation was a bit high. And he got outbid by a Russian investor, I think Yuri Milner, who outbid him and made a ton of money on Facebook. So since that day, Masayoshi Son has this motto: I'll never let a deal go away from me on account of valuation. If something I like and I think will succeed, I go and buy it. I don't haggle on valuation. So 250 million or 500 million. Now, this sounds like loose change. They said, go and buy it, come what may. You have to go and buy it. And the negotiations were all over the place. They did not discuss any of the business metrics. And Alok Sama has this wonderful wonderful sentence in the book. He says, my knowledge of corporate finance was as relevant to doing this deal as would experience of throwing darts be in a race. Right? Both are completely unrelated things. He says no corporate finance was there in this deal. We just looked at the last funding round, we haggled a bit, and in between that, we settled on the price and we went and did the funding deal. Now, here comes the monopolist part. Masayoshi Son, the monopolist. The moment news came out in the market that Softbank has funded Ola, Ola's competitor, Taxi for Sure, immediately went and sold out to Ola. Taxi for Sure founder said, we are winding up. We are selling out to Ola because there's no way we can fight. Imagine a card game where everyone is playing blind. No one has seen the cards. Or some have, or people have seen the cards, but you cannot call show. You have to keep bidding. Now, who will win that card game? The person with the maximum chips. Because other people will run out of chips. This is precisely that game. It doesn't matter how good your app is, what are the features, what is your business model, how energetic the founders are. None of that matters. The company with the maximum capital and the maximum money to burn is the last man standing and is the winner of the game. And Taxi for Sure is not just one. When Softbank went and announced a huge investment in Didi, the ride-hailing company in China, Uber said, we cannot suffer this much of cash burn. This guy is a crazy guy. And we've seen crazy guy wins. This guy is going to keep burning money as long as it takes. Better let's enter into merger negotiations with Didi. So Uber did a merger negotiation. Both companies became one. Uber got a stake in Didi, packed their bags and went home. So this is their playbook. If it is a winner take all kind of business, flood the company with so much money that no one else will dare standing in front of you. One may think that this is a foolproof way of doing things, but doesn't work all the time. So there's this interesting case of Oyo. Oyo, probably you know, Ritesh Agarwal is the founder. Peter Thiel runs this fellowship. He says his mental framework is largely colleges are useless and people who spend too much time in college are wasting their life. So bright students who are willing to drop off out of college, he's willing to fund them 100,000 US dollars. He's saying if you have a great startup idea and you are willing to drop out of college and start your business immediately, apply for fellowship, and if I accept your proposal, then I'll fund you 100,000 US dollars, no questions asked. So Ritesh Agarwal took him on his offer and dropped out of college and started this company called Oyo. Now the initial concept was it is something like a Uber for hotels. Uber does not own cars or does not have drivers on its payroll. Neither does it have permanent subscribers, but it matches the passengers with the cab drivers and earns a fee. So the concept of Oyo was the same. There's a big trust deficit in India, especially in the budget hotel category. You may book a hotel room online, but when you go there, the bathroom may not be proper, there may not be hot water in the bathroom, uh, there may be bed bugs, or the things may not be properly furnished, or it may be a very, very small room, and all kinds of things could happen. So Oyo said, we will go out and give our brand to eligible hotels where they are of a particular standard. So when you book a Oyo room, you are guaranteed of certain things. That was the starting point. But then came along Softbank. So here he had got 100,000 US dollars, then he got 100 million US dollars, and then thing was, oh, don't operate on a very, very asset light or a commitment free model. Go out and sign up for some rooms where you guarantee to pay them for certain occupancy and things like that. It aggressively started expanding. At the same time, the risk went up. Now, the founder was someone who impressed Masayoshi Son a lot. And again, the story in Alok Sama's book goes like this. At one function where a lot of people are there, Ritesh Agarwal is standing in some corner, and Masayoshi Son goes to him and starts talking. And Ritesh Agarwal is respectfully standing, nodding his head, shaking his head, and generally looks taken aback. And then we figure out what was that entire conversation about. So that conversation was this. Masayoshi Son goes to Ritesh Agarwal and says, take $500 million. Ritesh Agarwal has not asked for it. He says, take $500 million. You are a great founder. Your product idea is good. Uh, why are you restricting yourself to India? Go all over the world. Instead of doing just this, do you owe your townhouse, owe your life, this, blah, 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 and just blow up. Right? Uh, Now, what is true for India may not be true for some other market. Uh, Maybe US is best served by something like a Airbnb instead of a OYO kind of model. But this fellow was told, nothing doing, you have to do it. He offered 500 million. Ultimately, $250 million was invested. But this was not what the company asked for. Company was just there, and this fellow went and dumped money. Partly we can figure out why all these things happened, because so much of fundraise had happened. So in a very crude way, that there is something called the bladder theory of corporate finance. If your bladder becomes too full, you are going to pass that out sometime, whether willing or not willing. So if you have too much money, more money than you need, then you will start throwing out that money. So probably something similar happened to the Vision Fund or to Softbank. Basically, it simply blew up, and the organization structure or the founders were not ready for this. And here we come to that price fixing or price manipulation part. With Softbank, there were other venture capital funds in OYO. Now they protested, what are you guys doing? Why are you pumping in so much money and this and that? So rather than have these irritating people around, Masayoshi Son again went to Ritesh Agarwal and told Ritesh Agarwal, why don't you buy out all these people? Ritesh Agarwal is a young fellow college dropout, has taken 100,000 USD from Peter Thiel and burning money every day to set up OYO. Where does he have money to buy out all the all the venture capital investors? Says, buy them out for $2 billion in your personal capacity. How does he buy it for $2 billion? So, company is incorporated in Cayman Islands, RA Hospitality Holdings. This company buys out the stake of all these venture capital investors for $2 billion. Where do $2 billion come from? Banks lend money to RA Hospitality Holdings, $2 billion. Why will banks lend money to this Cayman Island shell company, which does nothing else but acquire this stake in Oyo? Because Masayoshi Son has personally guaranteed that lending. This fact came out later on that he had a personal guarantee and things like that. What this does is it immediately raises the mark to market of Oyo in the books of everyone who's invested in Oyo, largely Softbank. So it's like this: in an illiquid stock, you buy the stock at 10 rupees, and after 6 months, you say, I'll do a transaction with my son or daughter or spouse, or effectively buy it myself at 50 rupees, and suddenly the mark to market is that. So this is where a lot of people raise the eyebrows. So when Ritesh Agarwal bought it for $2 billion, obviously the value of the whole company, which would be much larger, at peak it had gone to a $10 billion valuation. And then because of losses and because of a lot of missteps which happened because of excessive funding, the valuation fell to $2.4 billion. So this was the uh, price manipulation or that kind of thing. Is this wrong? Now, here obviously it feels wrong that this is not right. But we will look at another counter example where who knows. And an interesting thing is Doug Leon of Sequoia actually went and met Masayoshi Son saying Oyo does not need this much money. It will distort the uh, operations and uh, it will distract the management from executing in India. Why are you doing this and that? This fellow was given a polite hearing, but ultimately they did what they wanted to do. And this is how uh, the entry of Vision Fund and Softbank has changed the game completely. So VC in tech space is not today what it used to be 10 years back or 15 years back. Today it's a very, very different game that is there, and people play by a new set of rules. The other interesting anecdote was about Paytm. In the early days, uh, there was a meeting with uh, SoftBank people. Nikesh Arora had met the founder, and they had rejected Paytm, saying, no, no, we don't think it will succeed, and all of that. And later on, once it apparently became successful, they put in money. So they were willing to change their mind and not stick with the past where they had rejected this company. But unfortunately for them, they got the timing wrong both times. At the first time, it was worthwhile probably investing. Second time, they entered at a high valuation. Then all the troubles with RBI came about, and eventually they had to exit at a loss. This is an investment in the global markets. Very, very interesting because uh, the world has recognized the importance of chip makers now with the huge run up in the market cap of Nvidia and ARM. Uh, SoftBank and Masayoshi Son recognized this many, many years earlier. So as we saw, he had wanted to build up a stake in Nvidia. Later on, what he did is he went and acquired this whole company, ARM, a British company. Uh, at that time, the market cap was around $20 billion odd. He went and gave a 50% premium and took the company private for $32 billion. Now, immediate reaction of SoftBank shareholders was negative. So, the $10 billion premium he paid here, the market punished the market cap of SoftBank. SoftBank market cap fell by $10 billion when this deal was announced. There was an attempt to merge it with Nvidia, which did not go through. But after that, the Vision Fund, which as we saw is the $100 billion fund where money has been raised from Saudi Arabia, UAE, and all of that. This company sold to Softbank. So both are internal entities. This is something like that RA Hospitality Holdings acquiring OYO. So this deal valued the company at $64 billion. So immediately something you have bought for $32 billion starts getting valued at $64 billion. Now again, this may seem inappropriate at that point in time or fraudulent or unethical, but actually today this is a listed company and valued at $148 billion. So in hindsight, this was probably right, or this was maybe even conservative. So who knows? Like I said, it's a crazy world out there. And this is the other part. So although SoftBank competes with Uber, they have invested in Ola in India. They have invested in Grab, which works in the entire Southeast Asia. As we saw, they were large investors in Didi, the Chinese company. So they compete with Uber almost everywhere in the world outside of US. But they went ahead and also bought shares in Uber. So sometimes when they like a field so much, they will even buy shares in the competitor, even be investors in the competitor. So what is this that we are talking about in summary? If you were to compare it with the Indian context, it's something like what happened in telecom in India. So you had Reliance entering in a big way, Jio, free trial, easily available SIM cards. Lot of companies exited, and finally then there was pricing power and things like that. So here it's a seeing things early, investing big, making your investment so large that competition starts getting scared and they exit the marketplace. And finally, when everyone has gone away, then you start making profits in that space. So basically, it's that. And in that period, bet on very, very aggressive people. If they are brash, so be it. Uh, they don't have to behave in a very good boy kind of uh, approach to media or anything. You have people like Rahul Yadav and Adam Newman and those kind of people who get the funding and then who go out and behave in a very aggressive manner in the marketplace. Now, this is very unlike the normal evaluation that we do in startups and all that. So, why is this uh, interesting in the current context? Let us say if you are evaluating the 10-minute grocery delivery business in India. Now, evaluating various business models, evaluating financials, all of that has zero relevance. Basically, you need to figure out after 5 years, after 10 years, which will be the one or two companies left which will survive. And which is a very, very different equation as compared to doing all the remaining metrics. Doesn't matter if the corporate governance is not that great, does not matter if there are related party transactions, which is the most well capitalized player and who will be the last man standing. So, it's a different way of looking at things. Thank you and happy to take any questions. Yes.
Is there an update that you can give us on how the Vision Fund is faring after all this? So this is almost like a, while effects and platforms are, you know, winner takes all, as you said, but they're all pull driven. This is almost like a push, push money in huge sums through the pipe and maybe accelerate or maybe choose the winner. So like you just give the example of quick commerce, maybe just identify one that with so much money that the rest just fold. So it's almost like a push, forcing the decision in a way or forcing the future. So if this is a fact, because there is this huge call it QE in the corporate world in terms of funding. I mean, somewhere in the end, it will normalize. So, is there a way to uh, how has the vision fund actually done, and is it actually on track to make that 100 billion, 1 trillion, or whatever? Because that will be the approach is going to sustain itself.
So no update that I have. One is these are very very large sovereign entities which have invested in this. Again, all of these investments are in the unlisted space. So ARM of course has gotten listed, and ARM in any case they did a private deal at a $64 billion valuation. But some bets have gone spectacularly wrong. Something like a WeWork has, as we saw, uh, more than $10 billion have been written off in that one single deal. And some things like ARM have done spectacularly well. I don't have a number for you in terms of this is the NAV right now or this is the annual return that has been achieved. Time will tell. We'll see.
Rajiv, a very fascinating story, but
Thank you.
I would like your take on this style of investment versus the others who remained at 8 billion or 20 billion or something like that. So, what's your personal take on this?
So personally, I think there are lot of advantages to being lean and mean in the early days. So venture capital in that era would be typically people coming out with a product in their garages. So you hear about the origin stories of an organization like Microsoft or Apple Computers, as it was then called, or Facebook. These started on a with very limited funding with a limited number of people. It has its advantages where if you are doing something very very innovative and where uh, you are the product will be something that will eventually win. But at the same time, as we saw in Blitzscaling, uh, if the product is out there and if it can be easily copied, and if other players are trying to come into that space, there is advantage in prioritizing scale over efficiency. So let us say if you have created Uber and you are the only player, then you can afford to be a long term player, raise limited amount of capital, spend your dollars wisely, and grow organically. But if you are Uber and the lift has already come in and then there's a race, then it makes sense to go in for a huge amount of capital, burn money to acquire customer, and scale very, very quickly.
With disruptions that are taking place at such high frequency, and if the quantum of cash burn leading to failed businesses increases, then how does the calculation work? Because as we said that in this case we just had one WeWork versus a more winner profile, right? But if that failure number outnumbers the winners, then how does a fund in a fiduciary role, right, take this further?
Sure, sir. So, uh, disruption is a real fear in something like, let's say, semiconductors or chips. Let's say currently NVIDIA's GPUs are leading, someone else could come out with a better GPU, and there's a technological change. Or people working on the metaverse, for example, one person is taking a particular technology path, someone else going down the road and taking a certain different technology path, then there's a possibility of disruption. But if it's a run of the mill product like ride hailing, where you are just trying to match the uh, rider with the driver, there's not much of disruption that is going to happen. Or if you're something like a Airbnb, where you are trying to get maximum uh, property owners onto your site and maximum vacation takers on your site and trying to match them, then it becomes a network effect kind of a business where cash burn is very, very important. If it's something which is technology driven, then your point is completely valid. You have to be like a fiduciary. You have to make sure that the governance is proper, money is now not siphoned off, cash burn is limited to only very, very necessary things and things like that.
The organized retail space, the number of people we saw, right, failures of Subiksha, to the way we see DMart today, and to the way right now DMart is being feared vis-a-vis the Blinkit's takeover of DMart business. Are these cash inflow propositions that you've made right now going to help these businesses? Because DMart may not need further capital, it's a cash rich company. Does these kind of strategies help company win the overall competitive landscape in which things are turning around to be?
So, although the VC environment in India has become very, very active, vibrant, and liberal, lots of funds are there, a lot of family offices are wanting to fund businesses and things like that. I don't think anyone is in the league of someone like Softbank or the Vision Fund. So let us say if 2 or 3 family offices come together and fund a startup, and against that startup, another startup is there which is funded by Softbank. My bet would be on the Softbank funded startup surviving rather than the other one. So I don't think there are many funds who can stand up to this big pool of money which is driven by the foreign VC investors.
So we can press the cash burn by a larger player. The whale wins and the smaller fish dies.
In a lot of cases, the answer is yes. The difficulty for the smaller fish becomes that much more. It's not guaranteed that the big guy will win, but the difficulty increases if the big guy has uh, a huge war chest of money to burn.
Hi, Rajeev. Thanks for this presentation. I was just wondering, I mean, given that one, as consumers, I mean, we've become more discerning about, I mean, the businesses that we choose to interact with. And also as investors, especially public market investors, I think we have also become more discerning in terms of the we choose to invest in. So I think, do you think from that sense, as we go ahead, I mean, this greater fools theory may not continue to apply, right? Because again, if you can continue to fund the losses, I think consumers can continue to engage with you. But the moment you stop it, I think we would look for alternatives. And similarly, public market investors to a point are okay with making losses on those businesses. But when it comes to, say, listing those businesses, they may raise eyebrows and say that they're not invested in funding those losses. So, what are your views on that?
Sure. Let's take the example of telecom, right? One player came in and said, I don't care about losses, I want market share. For all the discerning nature of consumers, people said, if I'm getting free data, free calls, I'll do that. And ultimately, there was not much of a choice left. At one point in time, you had 2.5 players left. Now, maybe there are 3 or 4. But ultimately, the dominance becomes so much that consumers are not left with choice. Initially, let us say the proposition of something like Lyft in the US was that we are for the discerning consumer, where will be fair to the consumer and to the riders and all those kind of things. But uh, if network effects go against you, then you will go where the strongest uh, network effect is. Now, let us say you are a resident of Mumbai and you want to subscribe to a newspaper, and for some reason you don't like the editorial policy of Times of India, but still you may end up subscribing to Times of India instead of going for the number 2 newspaper. So even public market investors, beyond a point, once the competition goes away, once the profitability comes back, people will come in, and I don't think investors are discerning at all, given the kind of valuations that are there in the public markets right now in some of the companies. One would have thought that investors are becoming discerning over time, but the kind of ease with which companies are able to raise money, the kind of price rises we are seeing in the small and mid cap space, and later on some of them are turning out to be not so well founded. I think investors and consumers ultimately have short memories.
Hey, that's for an answer. Thank you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. Wonderful energy.
Anyone from the Zoom audience had a question, please add. No, sir.
There's no questions. Oh, thank you.
Whenever things got rough, I always remember what my father used to say.
Running a business does test a man, my son. There are ups and downs, glorious highs, and sometimes a low that leaves you feeling defeated.
The character of a man and the character of a business are not very different, are they?
Yes. But when the chips are down, we must stand up, dust ourselves off, and motor on.
Volatility. It's a funny thing. It makes you question yourself and wonder if you've made all the right decisions.
Sure, you can question some of your decisions, but stay steadfast on your goals.
Dad always said, there are no shortcuts and no quick profits.
There are no free lunches, are there? There is only one
Right way.
At PPFAS, we think like Rahul and his father. That volatility is a fact of running a business. And buying equity shares is like owning a part of that business. We use value investing principles to manage your money. This means we invest in the right businesses at reasonable prices and for a longer term.
PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.